particularly Kenneth Miller from Brown University, have strongly rejected the flagellar motor as irreducible. He says, look, this can evolve. You can go on YouTube and watch what Dr. Miller says, but I'm going to rip it to shreds right now, so I don't know why you would want to do that. But if you would like to see that, go ahead. Miller objects on 3 grounds. If you watched the recent DVD that Michael Behe came out with, called the Revolutionary. You can get information on it on the internet. Just go ahead and go to YouTube and go Michael Behe Revolution, and you'll see places where you can order that. You can get it all day long on Amazon and other places. Miller objects on 3 grounds, and he actually brought this up at the trial in Dover in 2002. What Miller says, it fails to cite the imagination. You guys are just giving up. You're not doing the research. You're just going to come out and say, oh, God did it, okay? You're going to just say, you can't figure out how it evolved, so therefore God must have created it, and that's not science. So theorists cannot imagine how evolutionary mechanisms could have produced a certain species or structure, so they dismiss the possibility. But we have a clear understanding of evolutionary mechanisms, natural selection and mutation. These have been studied by science for many, many, many years, since the time of Darwin for natural selection, and certainly at least the last 50 or 60 years for mutations. No one has been able to imagine any evolutionary pathway for the development of the bacteria flagellum. They don't have a clue of how such a thing can occur. So my question for Dr. Miller was, how long do we have to wait for our imaginations to be able to explain this? Could that be hundreds of years, thousands of years? When would it be good enough, Dr. Miller? Now, Miller also objects. He says that this is the God of the gaps, since no one can figure out how the flagellar motor arose. Therefore, cosmic design must have done it. Cosmic design. Notice that's in quotes. But Miller conveniently forgets that we see an irreducibly complex molecular machine requiring 40 different proteins to precisely order those individual characteristics in a precise sequence. That's how they grow, in a precise sequence, so that they function together as a unit. Intelligent design is not an argument from ignorance, but based on knowledge and observable influence. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and continue on. Number 3 is the most important one, because bacterial flagellum is said to not be irreducibly complex. According to Miller, he's argued that natural selection and mutation, the Darwinian mechanism, could have built the flagellar motor one step at a time. Miller has maintained that by taking a series of biological machines currently being used in systems, he calls that co-option, nature could have scavengerized parts from other existing systems, okay? So let's say you want to build a bicycle and you go into your garage and you find a spring, and you take the wheel off of your car, and you take a hammer and you bend it a certain way, and you cobble together through time some kind of parts that you already have, and that is made into the organism. And that's how Miller says it must have happened. Natural selection. It borrowed parts from other systems, put them together, and made them into that flagellar motor. However, what would cause the mindless scavengerizing of parts from other molecular machines? Natural selection has no intelligence. It can't think, oh, let me take this part over here, let me take that part over there, and put them together. Since natural selection has no end game, it has nothing in mind when it selects for a plan for the future. It has no idea of a plan for the future. An intelligent agent could do this, but not the neo-Darwinian one. Evolution can't go into a garage and select parts to build a bicycle. The end game that intelligence has, it would never do that. And it can't work unless it's fully together. Okay, so you understand the analogy that natural selection could never cobble this together, because unless all the parts, 40 parts, are working together, it would never work or function as a unit. Miller argues that the type 3 secretory system, or better known as TTS, I'll just call it TTS, it's a microscopic syringe. That's what we can call it also, so you get the point. Microscopic syringe is an intermediate. He says, look, we can see how the bacterial flagella evolves because this microscopic syringe has 10 different proteins that are all similar to the bacterial flagellum. It could be the ancestor, or could it? Okay, so notice the number. He says there's 10 proteins in this particular organism, a microscopic syringe. What it does is it attaches to other organisms and drills a hole in there and essentially sucks out nutrients and so forth. And so he says this is an intermediate. That's where it comes from. It has 10 of the same proteins that the flagellar motor has, and so that shows you could evolve it from some other organism. Is that true? Okay, well, let's go to the next slide to find out. Again, the response to Miller. There are 40 parts, not 10, 40. You would have to put all these together just so. 30 of the proteins are not associated with that microscopic syringe. Only 10 of those parts. Where do the other 30 come from? They're not found in other systems. You have to have all 40 together at once, or you never get a flagellar motor that spins. And that microscopic syringe does not do the same thing as the flagellar motor. It never functions in the same way. It never looks like it or acts like it in any way. The additional 30 proteins then appear to be unique to the flagellar motor. Those additional 30 proteins would have been difficult to assembly. Again, you have to assemble them precisely cobble them together from other parts. But the other parts have to be worked on. If I take the wheel of a tire to use for my bicycle, it's not going to match up with a bicycle wheel. I have to modify that and work on it. And it would probably take far more work than buying it in the first place. And it might take me months just to get a similar type of wheel, but that would be with intelligence to get the bicycle wheel from the wheel of my car. Okay? Darwinists need an incredible evolutionary pathway with many steps documented for the flagellia to evolve, and the sophisticated factory that builds them, but they don't have any of that. They don't have any idea, no documentation of how you do that. Miller's claim is like saying you can travel from LA to Japan. Why? Because, well, I've got the Hawaiian Islands in between. You see, that's an intermediate. Well, no, I don't think so. You'd probably drown if you tried to get from, LA to Tokyo or any place like that, Japan. You could not evolve that just because you have one step, the Hawaiian Islands, in the middle. You don't have all those intermediate forms, and the syringe doesn't appear to be related in the first place. Yes?
Also, the detail about the proteins that I suspect this Miller guy is neglecting. The protein can be stated as chemical composition for a certain sequence of things, but also there's the manner in which the protein is shaped. If a protein is a string, it's not just
that's right.
Spaghetti.
And those have to be bound in particular shapes.
Right. Okay. And so you might say, well, here are 10 proteins that are common to 10 proteins over there, and I think he's just talking chemical composition. He hasn't said anything about what the shapes of those proteins are.
Or the function. Or the function, yeah.
Okay, and so he's probably very much understating the whole nature of proteins just by saying this same thing was found here and here. Because the laboratory tests that detects a particular protein may talk about the composition, but typically does not say anything about the shaping in that context.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I have right now a friend who is a creationist, and he's in a PhD program. And his study, what he studies, is how proteins form. And not only do proteins have to have the right amino acid sequence in a polypeptide chain in order to function, but they have to be folded precisely correctly in order to function a certain way. And so there's all these special folds that they encounter. If you look at a protein, it's like folded up all very incredibly precisely designed. So there's a lot to this. So, an additional response to Miller. Good evidence provided by Dr. Scott Minnick argues that the microsyringe, that TTS system that Miller says is an intermediate, appears after the flagellum, not before it. So you say, well, how do we determine that? By looking at the number of mutations in an organism, you can see if it's been, how long it's been around. And so the syringe appears to be a devolutionary product rather than evolving, rather than the flagellum evolving from it, bacterial flagellum. It appears that if anything, it's devolution, not evolution, that the flagellular motor appears to have been there before the syringe system. The TDAS system, or the syringe system, has 10 of the needed proteins in the flagellum, but 40 are needed, and they must all be in precise order and function and folded precisely the right way. Behe, Michael Behe, has argued that this co-option model of things cobbling together, okay, will not work, because even if the other 30 proteins existed in other biological systems, which they really don't, they're not known to be, so they would have to be refitted from other systems that would have to have them precisely fitted from other functions. That cannot happen. They would have to be refitted. What or how are they refitted? It can't be natural selection, because natural selection has no end game. It has to be something that enhances the fitness of the organism. Well, these proteins from other systems can't enhance the flagellular motor until the flagellular motor functions as a whole. So there's no fitness involved there. You can't take something out of this system that's fit in that system and bring it over here before you have all 40 parts together, unless you want to argue all 40 parts evolved at one time, but that would be absurd. Therefore, they would have to be completely retooled or reshaped in advance. But there's no end game for natural selection, so that's not possible. Evolution has no plan in mind when it selects. So for 20 years now, evolutionists have tried to refute the design in the flagellular motor without success. And that's where it stands today. People like Kenneth Miller have not made their case. They have not demonstrated evolution. An irreducibly complex system in the flagellular motor still exists. Okay, now I have a lot more information. Do you want me to continue?
No.
You want me to stop?
Well, we're probably about at the drawing and the question-answer point.
You want to take a break, or I can just stop here? What would you folks like to do?
We might have to ask you back.
I think that's the way it's going.
There's so much more to this, and we're so sorry for all the technical difficulties. There is tremendous evidence here that complex systems do exist that show design. I only was able to give one example of the flagellular motor. And even, I'll wrap it up with this, even the arguments that strongly say that some things are bad design, and that's what the evolutionists argue. They say, well, we don't see any evidence of design, and not only that, we see evidence of bad design. Why would there be design at all? There wouldn't be, but bad design, and therefore things could not have and did not evolve. Did not and could not have been designed, but rather did evolve. Those examples are really bad. And so if I had more time, I would have shown you evidence that these supposed bad design examples are actually good design. And there's other irreducibly complex systems, many, many others that exist. Okay, so if you want to go ahead, I'll stop that with that.
Let's just do the drawing right now.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay, we got